Hi, my name's Mel and welcome back to my channel Bookish Brummie. So one of my favourite authors is Stephen King. I've discovered him this year. I started reading his books in March and so far I've read I think about 26 or 27 of his books, and as you can see here I've got a bookcase dedicated to Stephen King. So this whole top row here are the ones that I've read, and then everything on the bottom two, you can't see the bottom shelf, but everything on the bottom two are the ones that I haven't read. And as you can see, I'm sort of enjoying collecting the Ultimate Storyteller collection covers. So at the moment I've got them arranged on the top shelf so that they're in publication order of what I've read, and then the ones below are in publication order of the ones that I haven't read. But I think when I finish reading them all I might then arrange them in colour order. I'm not really sure yet, but they're really fun covers, so you can do quite a few different arrangements with them. However, this video is not about arranging my shelves. This video is going to be another video where I talk about a Stephen King book in depth and do like a summary and talk about the plot line and the ending and what I think of it. So yeah, it is kind of a review, but I'd call it more of a summary than a review because I am going to be revealing bits of the story. So if you haven't read the book that I'm going to discuss today, I'll tell you what it is in a minute. But I would probably wait until you've actually read it before you watch the video. So we're going to be discussing my favourite Stephen King today, which is Christine. So yeah, if you haven't read Christine and you're planning on reading Christine, I'd recommend you go and do that and then come back to this video afterwards. This video is more if you've read the book and you want to have a discussion with somebody about the book, or you just want to see what they thought about the book. I didn't post this video. I should have probably posted this video in October when I was doing all of my Halloween reads, but I did post quite a few other in-depth Stephen King videos to do with the books that I was reading at the time, or books that I thought were like more appropriate for the Halloween season. But I definitely wanted to get around to this because I said this is my favourite one. I think this is my favourite, and it's probably followed by Mr. Mercedes, which is my next favourite. But I think when I talk about Mr. Mercedes, I will probably try and do a group sort of summary review of all of the Holly Gibney books. So I haven't quite finished yet because I've still got to read Never Flinch for that. However, we can talk about Christine. So Christine was published in 1983. It's one of the earlier works that he's done, and it's part of the Chilling Classics part of the Ultimate Storyteller collection. So in the Chilling Classics you have Cujo, which I've done a video for Cujo. I published that a few weeks ago, so if you want to go and check that out, that's available to view on my channel. And there's also Firestarter, Salem's Lot, Doctor Sleep, and The Shining in this particular range. So I've read all of them apart from The Shining and Doctor Sleep, so I'm sure we'll get around to that at some point. But yeah, so far, of all the around about 26 that I've read, this has stood out as my favourite. I can't even explain why it's my favourite. I just think that the story is written really well. It's quite off the wall, and the suspense is kept up really well, and I personally thought it was a page turner, and I really liked the ending as well. So let's get into it. This story centres around a car, as you can probably see. Most people have probably heard of Christine. So Christine is a 1958 Plymouth Fury, and essentially she's sitting on the side of the road, falling apart, cracking a windscreen, tyres are dud, there's like rust all over her, and essentially Arnie Cunningham, who's our main character, he's driving along with his friend Dennis Gilder. Now Dennis has got a car, he's driving the car, he's Arnie's best friend. They're driving one day and they see Christine parked up on the side of the road, and Arnie just falls in love straight away. So this story is being told from the viewpoint of Dennis, his best friend, which is quite interesting because obviously we're not seeing it through Arnie's eyes, we're seeing it through his friend's eyes, and his friend is like, I've never seen him fall in love like that over anything. And the way that he describes Arnie at the start of the book is that Arnie is just a normal teenager. He has quite a bad acne problem. He's not the most good looking guy at school. He gets bullied a fair bit by kids at school. And even his parents are sort of a bit manipulative towards him, and they sort of have these plans about, you know, where he's going to go to university and what he's going to do with his life. And he never really questions them, he never really argues with them, and that's the status quo in their household, and they're quite happy with that, that their will is going to be their way with him. So anyway, when he sees Christine, this is almost like from what Dennis says, the first independent thing that Arnie has ever really done for himself. So he says, you know, I want to buy this car, and he you know, goes in and he inquires, is this car for sale? And the guy who's selling the car is a guy called Roland LeBay. So he gives Arnie a price, and Arnie's like, oh, I will come back tomorrow with the funds. So he goes back with the money and he buys the car. The car is in such bad condition, like it's like really hard to drive off. So essentially he has to, I think on the way home he has to like get new tyres because it sort of breaks down on the way. It's not, you know, taxed properly, it's never going to be insured properly, it doesn't have the right certificates to be on the road. So his plan is just to get it to his house where he lives with his parents, and then he's going to start working on it. But when he gets it home, his parents are really upset about the car. You know, it looks a complete wreck. They don't want it outside the house. They think that he's nuts for having bought this car. They're like, that's an absolute money pit. And they have a really, really big argument about it. It's like the first time that Arnie has had a standoff with his parents over it. So already the moment the car has come into his life is already causing him a little bit of grief. But he absolutely won't back down. And his mum and dad are very much like, no, you can't keep it here. We don't agree with this. You know, you need to do what we say. You know, and Arnie at this point is like threatening to not go to the college that they want him to go to, and he's like, no, you know what, I'm sick of you controlling me. I actually want to do this. I want to work on this car. This is for me. I'm doing this. So he finds a garage called Darnell's, and in that garage, it's quite expensive to keep your car there, but they have all these tools that you can rent out to work on your car, and you can keep the car there long term. And there's lots of cars, you know, that are in there long term. But the fact that the guy Darnell who runs the garage, I think his name's William Darnell, but definitely Darnell. The guy who runs the garage, he's a bit of a shady character, but his garage does well, and it's been there for decades. And what Arnie doesn't realise at this point is actually Christine, the car, is used to been in this garage in the past. Like her previous owner Roland had actually took her there to do work on her before. So when he rents this garage space, Darnell sort of slightly thinks he recognises the car, but he's not entirely sure at first. Anyway, anybody who sees this car, they're like, this is an absolute wreck. This is like the worst decision that you've ever made, Arnie. Why are you buying this? Like, you know, you could use your money towards you know, a better car, a car that's not going to be a money pit. And as I've sort of previously said, like, the car has got a lot of visible problems on it that you can see. So anyway, Arnie is not going to be deterred by anybody. He goes into his savings. He pays quite the high cost to Darnell to keep Christine in this garage, and, you know, to rent the tools out and start working on it. Now, Arnie he knows a little bit about working on cars, but he doesn't know fully how he's going to do all the kind of things that he needs to do on this car. I mean, she needs like so much work, but he just knows that he's in love with his car and he's going to do it. So gradually over time, you know, he's sinking quite a lot of money into this car, and his parents actually find this out because his mum finds his savings book and finds out how much money he's actually put into it. But despite the fact that he's putting all this money into the car, like, Darnell, who's sort of running the garage, notices that Arnie is in the garage a lot. Like, he's in there most days after school until bedtime. And he's always like walking round Christine, but he doesn't really seem to be doing like the really big tasks or huge things to her. Yet somehow she seems to be looking better. Like, use the word healed. Like, there's, you know, less rust. Her interiors are improving, like the seating was like ripped, I think the fabric was, and like now it's not. And you know, like kinks that were in the bumper, like the fender, I guess you'd call it, are like no longer there. And he doesn't really remember Arnie doing that work, so he's a bit like, I must just not have noticed or whatever. And so many people have fallen out with Arnie over the car, and even the fact that Dennis questioned him, his best friend, over the car. Arnie's kind of like fallen out with a lot of people, so he sort of moved away from people, and a lot of people don't really see what's going on with Christine. Like, at first you only really know that Darnell can see that he's making like good changes to the car. So Dennis, as I say, Arnie kind of fell out with Dennis a bit because Dennis didn't think that this was the wisest purchase in the world. But, you know, he's he's trying to stand by Arnie, but he's trying to be a good friend and be like, well, from what I know about cars, like I'm not sure this is the best thing for you. And Arnie like really took offence to that. But Dennis was also a football player at school. So when I say football player, I mean as in like American football, which I suppose for the UK is like our version of rugby. So when I say football player, I mean like quite a violent sport. And he ends up breaking his leg during one of his games, which is absolutely tragic for him because he gets obviously taken off the team and he can't play football for the rest of the school year. And he has to have a surgery on his leg and he's in a cast. So this also means that he is not really he's not mobile, so he's not able to see Arnie outside of school a lot of the time because he can't drive his car. He's really dependent on other people giving him lifts places or coming to see him at the house, and he's in so much pain to begin with. Like for the first month or so he doesn't even really leave the house or go to school, so he only kind of knows what's happening with Arnie based on the odd phone call that Arnie gives him or feedback that he gets from other people. So Arnie's parents did ring him at some point. They actually blamed Dennis for Arnie buying the car. They didn't seem to realise that Dennis had tried to talk him out of it. So Dennis is sort of sitting at home with this broken leg, and he's sort of getting concerned about Arnie because, Arnie sort of got into himself and he's not talking to anybody. He's spending all his time with his car. But then one day, like, he actually does see Arnie and he sees like a massive change in Arnie. He's like, Arnie is more confident. The skin on his face had cleared up of the acne. And just the way he was walking, it was more kind of like he had ownership of himself and he wasn't, sort of hiding away from bullies. And so, Dennis is like, well, actually, maybe this car has been a good thing in a way. Yeah, it's a money pit, but maybe it's a good thing because it's boosted his confidence and he's doing really well. So he tries to tell like Arnie's parents that. And then, during this time as well, then Arnie actually meets a girl called Leigh. I think it's Leigh Cabot, I think is her full name, at school. She's like a new girl at school and she doesn't know him as like the geek that everybody sort of used to pick on, or, the person that nobody would consider attractive. So she actually quite likes him, so they start dating each other. Now, Leigh always feels a little bit uncomfortable about Christine because obviously Arnie introduces her to Christine at the garage before Christine can sort of drive out of the garage, and Leigh's like, oh, she's nice, but she sort of felt a tension with the car that she can't quite explain. So obviously I think we sort of gather as the book goes on that tension is because Christine is jealous of Leigh in some way, because obviously Leigh is going to now get some of Arnie's attention and Christine's not going to get all of the attention. However, in a way, as the story goes on, Leigh gets a bit jealous because Arnie seems to give all of his attention to Christine. So the other thing that's a bit bizarre with this car is that whenever Arnie's in it, he's always playing like this old 60s rock and roll music. He's not really listening to the music that he used to play. And there's like a weird smell that's sort of like water and death a bit coming out of the car. So when Arnie's actually in the car, it's almost like, from what's described, he changes into the previous owner, which was Roland LeBay, but in like a corpse-like version of him. It's very, very bizarre, and Arnie doesn't kind of realise that this is happening, that he's sort of changing, like not just, like his attitude towards life, but his appearance, obviously, like when he's in the car and things like that. And even his handwriting changes over time, and his attitude becomes more bitter. So whilst he had been more confident about seizing the day, he now starts to become like a really angry person, and just seems to think everybody's beneath him. And he sort of uses the same language terminology to swear about people that Roland LeBay had used when Dennis and Arnie had met him. Now in this time, Roland LeBay has actually died after he sold the car. So the car, it's not like anybody can go back and ask Roland. And Dennis is getting a bit concerned. So he decides, after Roland dies, that he's going to go to the funeral because he doesn't want to leave Arnie to go by himself. And at the funeral he meets George LeBay, who is Roland's brother. So Arnie will have none of it that there's anything wrong with him, there's anything wrong with the car, or there's anything wrong with Roland. So Dennis decides to quietly go off and have a chat with George, the brother, and just ask him, like, did you notice anything odd about the car? Did Roland behave weirdly, like, when he had this car? And George is kind of like, I can't really talk to you here, come and meet me. So later on, so Dennis goes and meets him, and it's a bit worrying, like, what George has to tell him, but he said that Roland had always been quite a nasty piece of work and really self-centered, and that essentially once he'd had a wife and a child, and their daughter had died in the car, like in Christine on the side of the road. And the mother, his wife, had been absolutely devastated, and Roland refused to get rid of the car. It was almost like it didn't bother him that his daughter had died in the car. So in the end, his wife ends up killing herself, which is absolutely terrible. So we've got all this tragedy that's already around Christine, but apparently Roland, the owner, he didn't really care. He only wanted to spend time with Christine. He wouldn't let anybody say anything against Christine, and had kind of like the same attitude that Arnie has towards everybody else who might want to criticise the car or say anything about the car or say that maybe the car shouldn't be there or that he should sell the car. So Dennis is like, okay, that's a bit weird, but he decides not to tell Arnie anything about it, because, you know, I can't really prove anything, but it is a bit odd that the owner had the same sort of attitude as Arnie's having towards the car. Now, I said previously that Arnie had been bullied at school, and there's a guy in school called Buddy Repperton who is a right piece of work. He's not quite as bad as the bully from It, but he's bad enough. So he corners Arnie one day outside, like on the football playing field near the bleachers, and he threatens him with a knife, and it's escalating pretty badly, and Dennis also sees it as well, and eventually one of the teachers comes and intervenes, and essentially Buddy gets expelled from school. Now, it wasn't just Buddy, I think he had about like 4 friends with him as well that were like involved in this. So Buddy absolutely is like so annoyed with Arnie about, you know, him being expelled. He cannot see that it was his fault and that he shouldn't threaten him with a knife. He's just like, no, you snitched on me, and he's going to get revenge. So the way he gets revenge is he goes to Darnell's garage and he does a huge amount of damage to Christine, like smashes her up, you know, which is absolutely terrible. So this ends up in a big fight between Buddy and Arnie in the garage, and Buddy is essentially told that he can't be in the garage anymore by Darnell, and Arnie essentially is left with Christine in bits, and all the work that he'd previously done on her seems to have been undone, and like Buddy's like really gone out of his way to like pour sand in the gas tank and all kinds of things to get his own back on Arnie. Like completely outrageous what he'd done. So from that point then, Arnie becomes even more, you know, withdrawn, has to spend more time fixing the car, spend more money fixing the car. However, the car has now reached a point where it can sort of go out and do small trips, and Darnell, who owns the garage, had given some kind of certificate to Arnie which said that it was like safe to drive or something. So he'd taken Leigh out on a date, and I think that happened before Buddy had come and like ruined the car. So she had been out, and this is where Leigh sort of felt quite uncomfortable with the car. So anyway, after this vicious attack on Christine, Leigh is like in bed, and she senses that Christine is outside. So she's like looking out her window, and Christine is like parked outside on her street. She's like, well, how did she get there? Like, that's a bit weird. And this car now seems to sort of go on jaunts in the night time by itself. And Arnie doesn't know anything about it. Arnie's normally out of town when these kind of things are happening, or he's with somebody. So he's always got a witness as to where he is, so it's not him driving the car. Anyway, this Darnell character in the garage that he's in as where he's keeping his car, I've mentioned before that he's a bit of a shady character. So in order like that Arnie stays in good favour with him, Arnie started doing jobs for Darnell, which seemed to be like drug running. So he's doing that for Darnell, so Darnell's sort of signing Christine off even though she's not in the best state to, like, you know, drive places and stuff in quiet areas, like, you know, don't take it on the like freeway or whatever, but you know, you can go down the back roads here and there, and so they've got a bit of an arrangement going on. Christine is really obviously annoyed, if a car can be annoyed. This is a funny thing about this book, because obviously this book is has its own personality. And at first the personality is just hinted at because it's, you know, you get an ominous feel about the car, or you think you saw the car somewhere but you're not entirely sure. And that's how it's like built up in the first part of the book. You don't really sort of think of the car as behaving on its own as such. You think, oh, it's just people feeling a bit off about the car, but they can't really prove anything about the car, and she wasn't in the state to move anyway. But she wants her revenge, so there's like several different attacks throughout the book where she actually attacks what would be considered, I suppose, Arnie's enemies. So she goes for Buddy Repperton, and essentially what ensues is a chase across a park where essentially she is running on her own. She doesn't have Arnie driving her, so she's chasing the car that Buddy Repperton is driving, and essentially forces his car into a massive collision, and like, you know, basically I think he gets thrown out of the vehicle, or some of them get thrown out of that vehicle, and then she continues to finish those people off. There was another one of the people who were connected to that group of people, and she found them in the street on a night time, and, you know, ran into them and ran them over to the point where there was no way that they were getting up again. They were just, you know, squashed into the floor. And then Darnell, you know, the attack on him is quite severe. She goes to his house and she rams the front of his house in, and he's trying to hide by climbing up the staircase. So she comes and she rams the staircase, and she's like, she's going to get him. So it doesn't matter like if he's trying to go higher up, like she's like, I'm going to get him. So when these murders happen by her, she, you know, she goes off and she goes and parks back in the garage, and nobody ever knows that she's moved. But there's a police officer, and he's getting a little bit suspicious because they found this red paint on the one victim, which is the same as Christine's paint, and obviously they found tyre marks. Now Christine's like a toffee apple red colour, and apparently that was like a custom paint job. So it's not like there's lots of them like have heard that colour, but obviously, you know, nobody thinks that the car can drive itself, and Arnie had an alibi for the times that those attacks happened. So it was recognised that these attacks were happening on people that had done bad things to Arnie, but, you know, it can't prove that Arnie was in the car driving it, and also that they can't find any damage on Christine, because by the time she's gone back into Darnell's garage, she's healed herself, which is quite a scary thought, and it gets like, that's what makes it a bit scarier, I think, as the book goes on. So Lay, his girlfriend, you know, she sort of talks about her concerns with Arnie, and Arnie doesn't want to hear it, and he falls out with her over it, and essentially she leaves Arnie. She's like, you know, I'm uncomfortable with the car. You know, and she doesn't really like that they don't spend that much time together because he's always involved with the car. She feels like the car is bad news, and she doesn't want that in her life, so she leaves him. But he doesn't seem to understand that she's left him. He seems to think that he's going to get her back, and he's not even like, he's almost not taking the breakup seriously. He's like, oh, she'll come back, and his attitude towards her is pretty poor. In fact, his attitude is very similar to Roland's, like his attitude towards women. So Arnie's talking about this with Dennis, you know, and Dennis is like, well, you know, she seemed pretty unhappy, you know. So anyway, Dennis and Lay have become good friends, really, because Lay had kept coming to Dennis to talk about her concerns about Arnie and her concerns about the car, and Dennis obviously been talking about his concerns about Arnie and the car with her, because, you know, Arnie won't listen to anybody, and he doesn't really want to, you know, go to Arnie's parents and worry them unnecessarily about his concerns about all this, because, you know, he can't like prove anything. But they essentially start coming to the conclusion that Christine is alive, and that she's, you know, self-healing, and you know, because there's things that seem to repair themselves on the car that would have cost a lot of money, like a new windscreen, things like that, would have cost a lot of money, that they're pretty sure Arnie's not ordered, yet somehow she's had a massive crack in a screen, and then it like disappears. And yeah, they're like suspicious that a lot of these people are dying that have crossed Christine or crossed Arnie. So after Leigh and Arnie have split up, Dennis and Leigh have formed a relationship already, so they start dating each other, but they're obviously keeping this from Arnie because Arnie seems to be spiralling, seems to be a bit of a loose cannon, seems really angry, and nobody could seem to get through to him. And Dennis is trying, but yeah, Arnie's quite difficult. Anyway, one day Arnie comes across Leigh and Dennis and realises that they are having a relationship behind his back, like they haven't told him. So even though Leigh has left Arnie, neither of them have told him that them two have started a relationship. So he's really mad, and as a result of this, Arnie, you know, he just walks off. But they know, like Dennis and Leigh know that Christine is probably going to come and hunt them down and kill them, because anybody that seems to get in Arnie's way at the moment seems to get, you know, murdered by a car, like run over, in, you know, situations that can't seem to be explained by the police. So they decide that they are going to have to do something about this. They are going to have to kill Christine first. So even though Dennis has still got a broken leg and he still can't really drive, Leigh can't drive. So he orders this massive, I think it's it's either a sewage or a rubbish dumper truck, like a really big heavy industrial truck. And it's quite difficult for him to drive because it's a clutch, and obviously he's got a broken leg and it's only just sort of started to heal. So it's difficult for him to put the pressure on that he needs. But anyway, he's like, this has to be done, and it has to be done soon, because otherwise she's going to have us. So they need to wait for Arnie to leave town so that they can corner Christine, because obviously Arnie's always with Christine. So the opportunity comes where Arnie goes out of town with his mum, and they think, right, this is the moment. So they drive this massive truck thing to Darnell's, and they plan to basically corner Christine in the garage. But they realise, like, they're waiting for a moment when Christine has gone out. They're realising that Christine is self-driving, she's going out. So they're waiting in the garage, they're waiting for Christine to come back. So essentially she doesn't know that they're waiting in this vehicle in the garage. But Christine's a bit cleverer than they sort of gave her credit for. So when she comes back in the garage, like, she's there, and she sort of manages to avoid the vehicle at first, like when it goes to hit them. So then, you know, they try to use Leigh as bait. She gets out of the vehicle to try and draw Christine towards the big truck so that the truck can smash into her. And this puts Leigh in, like, in a really dangerous situation. And I tell you what, this scene is like so fun to read. It just has you on the edge of your seat, because, you know, you're just like, oh my god, like, this is escalating more and more and more, and you think, oh, you know, are Leigh and Dennis gonna die? Is Christine actually going to beat them, despite the fact they're in this big truck? But you also have to ask the question, is like, how is it exactly that they think that they can destroy this car when this car seems to self-heal? So that's the other question. And that sort of does happen, because when they are bashing into Christine, the dents keep popping out, and it's almost like every time they think she's down, it's like, nope, dents pop out and she gets back up again, you know. So it's like, how on earth are they going to destroy this car? It's like absolutely, you know, you're absolutely on the edge of your seat while you're reading these scenes for this final showdown. So yeah, obviously they appear to be successful. They get to a point where they absolutely smash to bits, and I think the gas tank blows up, I can't quite remember, but I do know it's basically at a point where Christine, you can't even tell it was a car as such, because she's in that many pieces spread across the floor and flattened and dented. You know, they're sort of sat looking at it thinking, is that it? Like, you know. So who knows, she may actually be able to put herself back together. But at the same time, while this is happening, while they're away, they then find, after they've managed to destroy Christine, that on the way back home, when Arnie was travelling back home with his mum in their car. There'd been ice on the road and their car had gone off, and Arnie's dead. So Arnie dies at the end of the book. And you do wonder, because Arnie has died, is that the reason why Christine couldn't put herself back together? Is there some link between the love between the owner of the car and then the car that basically fuels the car, to make it self-healing and to give it the sort of personality and to give it the, you know, the idea that it needs to protect the owner? Because with Roland LeBay, he obviously loved the car, but he sort of left her on the curb and not really done much with her for years and years and years and years. So you just kind of wonder, like, maybe she didn't self-heal at the beginning of the book when she was on the curb, because she wasn't cared for as much anymore and she wasn't loved as much anymore. And then obviously Arnie took her and Arnie loved her. So maybe it was Arnie's love that essentially gave like the personality and the power to Christine to then start self-healing and thinking, okay, this is my owner, I need to look after him, these are his enemies, and you know, and she's also got like her own enemies, like the ones that tried to attack her, but obviously there are his enemies as well. So you just sort of wonder, like, is it the moment that Arnie had died that then she wasn't able to come back to life? Or, you know, if she goes to the scrapyard, will she ever come back together? If somebody tried to put her parts back together and then loved her, would she then, would we have Christine too? Like, you don't really know, and I do kind of like that ending in the book, because I think that it's sort of again open to, it could be over for Leigh and Dennis. They might be able to live happily ever after in their lives, but you kind of doubt it, because, you know, if the car can put itself back together earlier on in the book, it's probably going to do it later on as well. And then the fact that, you know, I wouldn't say they did Arnie dirty, but yeah, he was not happy about the fact that obviously they got into a relationship. So, as I say, one thing I really like about this story is the pacing of the story. You know, it's really, really good. I like the fact that it's told from Dennis's point of view as well, because I think obviously telling it from the friend's point of view, you can have more insight into how insane Arnie's actually becoming. You know, and then he can sort of sit and talk about how Arnie used to be. I think Arnie would have been a very unreliable narrator. And I think there's quite a few characters in the story, but they all seem to add to the overall plot line. I think the instances where Christine is attacking people, you know, it's so brutal, but it's so well written, like absolute page turner. You've also got the element of obviously of a bit of a ghost story there, because obviously when Arnie's sitting in the car, he seems to turn into like Roland LeBay. There's like one time when Dennis is in Christine with Arnie, and when Arnie turns around, like he's a skeleton, like he's like Roland LeBay and like stinks like a corpse. But then outside the car, he's like back to Arnie again. It's just really weird. So you do have that sort of spiritual, ghostly, paranormal aspect to the story as well, as the violence of the story. I think that the ending was really good in this Stephen King, and I just thought it was perfect. There was just like not one part of it that I didn't like. I just, from the moment that I started reading it, I really got into the characters. I liked all of the characters. I was invested in them all. I thought that it, you know, it was a page turner. It ticked along at a really, really good pace. You know, and just the way that the car's violence was sort of introduced was really good as well, because it wasn't there right at the start. At the start, you were like not really sure what kind of story you were getting, because, as I say, you just sort of felt it was in the heads of the people that were looking at the car. And then, you know, from about like 2/3 in, or halfway in, then the car starts getting its personality. Like, oh no, like we're actually doing this. Like, this car is alive. It's self-driving and attacking people. So yeah. Let me know what you think of Christine. I have not really seen anybody review this book. I don't think it ranks that badly in most people's ratings, but I don't really see it being like, you know, top rated. To be honest, if I could, I'd give this 6 out of 5 if that was possible. Like, I just really, really like this. I could read this again and again and again. And interestingly, I read a collection of stories called Nightfall by Isaac Asimov the other week, and there's a story in there called Sally. and Sally was written in 1953, I think. And that's also about self-driving cars who get justice for things that are done wrong to them. So I do wonder if that story did influence Stephen King in writing this, because Stephen King would have been a small boy when that story came out, so there's every chance like he read that and then, you know, got inspired and then wrote this wonderful, wonderful book, Christine. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of Christine. If you enjoyed it, what was your favourite bit about it? You know, and do you think that Arnie got what he deserved? Because I'm not really sure how I feel about the fact that he died at the end of the book. I would have kind of liked it if he'd have, you know, been able to salvage his life after Christine had gone. But then there's a part of me that thinks that Christine might not have been destroyed if Arnie hadn't died, so maybe Arnie had to die, so I don't know. What do you think of that as well? So I hope you've enjoyed this summary, and I say any comments, let me know down below, like I'd welcome them, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening. Bye.